They said Vorik 7 was a graveyard, a frozen death trap where no species could survive. Every attempt ended in failure, until humanity arrived. Armed with nothing but grit, ingenuity, and a refusal to die, they weren't just here to survive, they were here to conquer the unconquerable. On Vorik 7, survival isn't an option, it's a war. And humans? Humans don't lose. That was the warning etched into the cold steel plaque of the Galactic Union's Grand Assembly Hall, displayed beside the names of every species that had dared set foot on the frozen exoplanet. Dozens of names. Dozens of civilizations, some of them extinct now. All of them had failed. And now the humans were next. Across the galaxy, the challenge had been issued. The Union, the bureaucratic body that governed interstellar affairs, had declared Vorik 7 unconquerable. The planet was a cursed wasteland of endless ice storms, tectonic fractures, and gravity wells that pulled ships to their doom. It was a world where temperatures plunged below survivability, where even the most advanced life support systems failed within days. The Union had wagered that no species could colonize it for more than a single cycle. They had been right until now. When humanity responded to the challenge, the galaxy watched with a mix of curiosity and morbid anticipation. The humans were a young species, barely out of their cradle system, but they had already built a reputation for defying the odds. They thrived where others perished. They conquered environments deemed inhospitable. But Vorik 7? That was a death sentence. Yet here they were. The ISV Endurance, a heavily modified deep space research vessel, cut through the dark abyss, its reinforced hull bracing against the gravity wells of Vorik 7's turbulent orbit. Inside, Captain Elias Rourke stood on the command deck, eyes fixed on the swirling nightmare of white and blue below. "We're about to make history, people," Rourke said, his voice calm but firm. He turned to his crew, a mix of survivalists, engineers, and hardened veterans who had trained for the worst conditions imaginable. "No species has lasted longer than a week down there. We're going to last a year." Dr. Isla Voss, the mission's chief biologist, adjusted her thermal suit, her dark eyes flickering with concern. "That's assuming we don't get ripped apart before touchdown. Vorik 7's weather system is unstable, to say the least." "Unstable is an understatement," grunted Lieutenant Marco Trent, their lead security officer. "The last expedition barely had time to scream before they were buried under 6 tons of ice." Rourke smirked. "Then let's not scream." The ship's AI, Horizon, chimed in with its cold, synthetic voice. "Initiating atmospheric entry. Severe turbulence detected. Recommending immediate course correction." The vessel lurched violently as they pierced the upper atmosphere. The temperature outside plummeted to near absolute zero. Frost formed instantly across the ship's reinforced windows. The onboard lights flickered as electromagnetic interference battered their systems. "Thrusters at full?" Rourke barked, gripping the edge of his chair. "Keep us steady." The Endurance fought against the storm. Winds howled like spectral wraiths, slamming against the hull, dragging them toward the planet's surface at impossible speeds. The ground came into view, an endless, jagged wasteland of ice, fractured canyons, and towering spires of frozen rock. Then the alarm screamed. "Electromagnetic storm intensifying. Hull integrity compromised. Brace for impact." The ship crashed through a field of razor-sharp ice shards, the landing thrusters failing one by one. It wasn't a controlled descent anymore, it was survival. Rourke saw the numbers flashing red on his display. They were coming in too fast. Then, impact. The force nearly tore them apart. Metal groaned and screeched as the ship skidded across the frozen terrain, carving a deep trench into the ice. Sparks erupted from the control panels. Steam hissed as emergency seals activated. For a long moment, there was nothing but the sound of settling wreckage. Then silence. Rourke's head pounded, but he was alive. Slowly he unstrapped himself, looking around at his team. Isla coughed, shaking frost from her hair. Marco groaned, checking his pulse. "No fatalities." "Not yet." "Damage report," Rourke rasped. Horizon responded first. "Hull breach in sections 3 and 5. Primary power compromised. Oxygen reserves critical. External temperature, negative 160 degrees Celsius." Marco exhaled sharply. "We need to get out of this wreck before the cold kills us." Rourke pushed himself up, staring at the icy wasteland beyond the cracked viewport. Vorik 7 loomed outside, a frozen nightmare waiting to consume them. No species had survived this place. But humanity was not just any species. The camera drone outside the ship captures movement in the ice. Something massive is watching them. "All right," Rourke said, rolling his shoulders. Let's show this planet what we're made of. The cold seeped in fast. Not just through the cracked hull of the Endurance but through the walls of their bones into their marrow. Vorik 7 wasn't just cold, it was predatory. The kind of cold that didn't just freeze you. It haunted you. Captain Elias Rourke took a deep breath, watching the vapor curl from his lips and vanish almost instantly. The thermal suits were holding, barely. The ship's emergency generators were still functional, but their core systems were damaged. That meant no long-term heat, no stable oxygen, and no reinforced shelter. They had hours at best. Horizon status? Rourke asked. The AI's voice crackled through his earpiece, distorted by electromagnetic interference. Life support systems at 27%. External temperature, negative 160 degrees Celsius. High probability of localized ice quakes. Atmospheric disturbances increasing. Marco Trent, the team security officer, scanned the area through a cracked viewport. Looks like we got lucky. If we'd landed 20 clicks east, we'd be inside one of those fissures. Isla Voss was already at the ship's sensor panel, trying to restore local readings. Define lucky, she muttered. We're still stranded on a frozen nightmare with no hope of rescue. We don't need hope, Rourke said. We need a plan. Survival protocol. The plan for now was simple: secure shelter, restore communications, and assess threats. They moved fast. The first priority was sealing the hull breaches, reinforcing the ship's structure to trap whatever heat they had left. Marco and the engineering team worked on patching the worst of the damage, using thermal sealant to cover the gaps. It wouldn't hold forever, but it would buy them time. Meanwhile, Isla and her science team worked on stabilizing their oxygen reserves. Vorik 7's atmosphere was thin, but some pockets held trace amounts of breathable gases. If they could find a way to filter and pressurize it, they might extend their survival window. The wind howled outside, a mournful, eerie sound. It wasn't just the wind. It was the planet itself, shifting, moving, whispering. And something was watching them. It was one of the drones that saw it first. The Endurance had deployed 3 autonomous survey drones upon impact. 2 had been lost in the crash, but the third had survived, hovering just above the frozen surface, scanning the terrain. Now it was sending back footage. Isla's fingers trembled as she magnified the display. Oh, Captain? Rourke leaned in. The drone's camera, flickering in the electromagnetic haze, showed a vast ice field stretching into the horizon. Cracked glaciers, towering frozen spires. And something else. Something big. At first it was just a shadow, a disturbance in the ice. Then the drone's thermal scanners picked it up. A heat signature. Impossible. Vorik 7 was too cold to support natural life beyond microbial organisms. Nothing warm-blooded should exist here. And yet, something was moving beneath the ice. Rourke activated his comms. Marco, we're not alone. Marco grabbed his rifle and moved to the viewport. Confirm that. Isla swallowed. It's real. It's huge. And it's getting closer. The drone's camera zoomed in as the ice fractured. A massive silhouette shifted beneath the frozen crust. The ice trembled. Something was rising. Then the ice exploded. The thing that emerged was not an animal. Not in any way they understood. It was titanic, at least 30 meters tall, its body encased in thick crystalline armor that glowed with eerie blue bioluminescence. It had too many limbs, 6, maybe 8, clawed and jagged, designed for ripping through ice. Its head was elongated, its mouth bristling with serrated mandibles, dripping with something that didn't freeze even in this cold. The drone tried to adjust its focus, but a sudden EMP burst fried it midair. The feed cut out. The creature screamed. A piercing, deafening shriek, an unnatural fusion of ice cracking, metal tearing, and the deep, guttural roar of something that should not exist. Isla stumbled back from the screen. Oh hell no. Marco grabbed his weapon. Tell me we have a plan for that. Rourke's mind was already racing. The Union had said this planet was uninhabitable. That no species had ever survived here. That no life could thrive. They had been wrong. Something had survived. Something had evolved to dominate this frozen wasteland. And now, it knew they were here. The creature turns its glowing eyes toward the wreckage of the Endurance, and begins to move toward them. The ground shook. Not from the howling winds or the planet's shifting ice, but from the sheer weight of the thing approaching them. The beast's claws, massive and jagged, sank into the frozen crust, splintering it with every step. The glow emanating from its crystalline armor pulsed in eerie rhythms, as if it were thinking, as if it were deciding. And then it charged. Move? Rourke bellowed. The team scrambled. Marco shoved Isla toward cover as the beast lunged forward, its limbs crashing into the hull of the Endurance. The entire ship lurched, metal screaming under the impact. Ice and debris rained down as the shockwave rippled outward. Weapons up, Marco growled, leveling his rifle. We don't even know if it can be hurt. Isla snapped, pressing herself against the ship's remains. The security team opened fire, the sharp cracks of their pulse rifles swallowed by the storm. Blue-tinted energy bolts streaked through the frozen air, striking the beast's crystalline exoskeleton. The impacts left glowing scorch marks but no real damage. The creature barely flinched. Instead, it pivoted, its limbs shifting with disturbing speed. Then, from beneath its plated body, something unfolded. Incoming, Isla shouted. A blinding pulse of energy erupted from the creature's core. The impact shattered the remaining hull plating, sending bodies flying. Rourke hit the ice hard, his vision blurred from the shockwave. He groaned, trying to push himself up, just in time to see the creature rear back for another strike. And then, something clicked in his mind. Rourke didn't care. Right now they needed time to adapt. Stop shooting, Rourke roared. Marco hesitated, still aiming down his rifle. Are you insane? Trust me. For a moment, the only sound was the wind screaming around them. The creature paused. Its glowing eyes locked onto Rourke. Its mandibles clicked, studying him. Assessing. And then Rourke understood. It's not attacking us because we're prey, he murmured. It's attacking us because we're intruders? Isla's breath hitched. You think it's defending territory? No, Rourke's mind raced. I think it's testing us. Marco's jaw tightened. Testing us for what? Then, as if in response, the creature let out a deep, guttural vibration. It wasn't a roar. It was something else, a challenge. It had expected them to flee. But humans? Humans didn't run. Rourke slowly rose to his feet, forcing his body to still against the biting cold. He raised his hands, not in surrender but in defiance. The creature's eyes pulsed. Its limbs twitched. And then, with an almost deliberate slowness, it stepped back. Isla exhaled, barely believing what she was seeing. It accepted that? Marco kept his rifle trained. Are we sure it's not just getting ready to kill us later? Maybe. Rourke took another steady breath. But right now, we're still alive. The beast lingered for another few seconds before turning and vanishing into the frozen wasteland, its bioluminescent glow fading into the storm. It was gone. For now. Isla let out a shaky laugh, half in disbelief. We are so far off the Union's survival charts, it's not even funny. No, Rourke turned to the wreckage of their ship, then to the vast, brutal terrain ahead. We're exactly where we need to be. Because no other species had ever lasted this long on Vorax 7. And now, they weren't just surviving. They were adapting deep beneath the ice. Something else stirs. Something even older, even deadlier than the creature they just faced. The storm had settled into a low, bone-deep howl, whispering across the ice like a dying breath. The world had gone still, but Rourke knew better than to trust the silence. They had survived the first challenge. The creature, whatever it was, had tested them and for now deemed them worthy enough to live. But Vorax 7 was not done with them yet. Isla crouched near the shattered remains of the Endurance's external sensor panel, desperately trying to recover any data from the drone before it had been fried. Her fingers trembled, not from the cold but from what she had seen. That thing, she muttered, voice shaky, it was waiting for us. Rourke glanced toward the empty expanse of ice where the beast had vanished. It wasn't hunting, he agreed. It was watching. Marco reloaded his rifle with a grim expression. I don't like being part of a science experiment. Then Horizon's voice crackled through their remaining comm systems. Captain, long-range scanners have detected an anomaly. A distress signal, origin unknown. A signal? Isla's head snapped up. From the Union? Negative. Horizon's usual neutral tone carried an edge of something close to unease. The signal is old. Very old. Estimated origin date, 427 cycles prior. The team fell silent. That was impossible. Vorax 7 was supposed to be a death world, completely uninhabited, devoid of survivors. The Union's official records claimed no species had ever lasted more than a few days here. So who had sent that signal? Rourke made the call within seconds. We're going? Marco scowled. You cannot be serious. We need shelter. We need supplies. And most of all, we need to know what the hell is going on here. Rourke's voice was steady. Something survived out there long enough to send that signal. That means we can too. Isla nodded, already gathering what little equipment they had left. If that distress beacon is still active after 4 centuries, it means there's power. Maybe even something we can use to get comms back up. Marco muttered a curse under his breath but didn't argue. Fine. But if we run into any more nightmare creatures, I'm shooting first. The journey took 3 hours, each step crunching through ice thicker than steel. Vorik 7's gravity made every movement heavy, draining their strength faster than they had expected. Then they saw it. Half buried beneath the ice, its structure twisted and broken, was a ship. Not a Union vessel. Something older. The hull was blackened with age, scarred by impact fractures. Strange alien glyphs were barely visible along its side, worn down by centuries of relentless cold. It was massive, almost a kilometer long, too large to have simply crashed here unnoticed. This ship hadn't just fallen. It had been buried. Isla's voice was barely a whisper. This isn't just a distress signal. This is a grave. They forced open what remained of the airlock, stepping inside to find the interior frozen in time. Bodies, twisted, skeletal remains, were scattered across the floor, their forms locked in positions of agony. Marco exhaled sharply. What the hell happened here? Rourke knelt beside one of the corpses. Even after centuries, its exoskeletal structure was preserved. Elongated limbs, multiple eyes, thick plating that suggested a species adapted for war. A long-dead warrior race. But it wasn't the bodies that sent a shiver through Rourke's spine. It was the wall carvings. Etched into the metal, spanning the entire chamber, were symbols. Some were indecipherable, but one stood out, written in a language that had no place being here. Galactic Union Standard. Isla read it aloud, her voice barely above a whisper. Do not awaken the prisoner beneath. Do not listen to its voice. Do not let it escape. Vorik 7 is not a world. It is a tomb. The air went still. And then from deep beneath the ruins something moved. And why had it never been answered? The floor trembles as something awakens beneath them, something even the Union had tried to forget. The ground trembled, a deep, bone-rattling rumble that sent ice cascading from the ship's shattered interior. Something was awake. Rourke's grip tightened on his rifle, his breath misting in the frigid air as he scanned the darkness below. They weren't alone in this tomb. Isla stepped back, her eyes darting between the alien warning scrawled across the walls and the trembling floor beneath them. This wasn't just a crash site, she murmured. This ship wasn't buried by accident. It was sealed here. Marco's voice was grim. Then we just kicked open its coffin. Then Horizon's voice crackled over their comms, but it wasn't alone. Warning. Unidentified transmission detected. A second voice followed, deep and distorted by interference, but unmistakably alive. You were not meant to come here. The floor split. A great fracture tore through the ice, revealing a deep, spiraling abyss beneath the ship. Glowing veins of something unnatural pulsed far below, illuminating the cavern in an eerie blue light. And from the depths, it began to rise. Rourke caught a glimpse of it, a figure massive and obscured by the mist, limbs extending in ways that defied biology. It wasn't like the ice beast they had encountered before. This was something worse. Isla was already moving. We need to get out of here, now. They scrambled back toward the entrance, but the structure shuddered, ancient metal groaning as if protesting their escape. The ship wasn't letting them go. Marco fired into the ice behind them, blasting open a temporary path. Move. They barely made it outside before the entire ruin collapsed, sealing whatever lay below back into its frozen grave. For now, back at the wreckage of the Endurance, Rourke stared at the stars, his mind racing. The pieces were falling into place. The Union had declared Vorik 7 a death world, a planet impossible to colonize. They had framed the challenge as a simple test of survival. But that was the lie. The reality? Vorik 7 was never a planet. It was a containment zone. Isla sat beside him, clutching a data pad recovered from the ruins. The distress signal was never a call for help, she said. It was a warning. Someone out there knew what was buried here. Marco crossed his arms. And the Union let us come here anyway? Rourke exhaled slowly. Because they wanted to see if we could survive. His voice was hard now. They didn't send us here to test our endurance. They sent us to see if we'd make the same mistake they did. To see if humans were stupid enough to unseal it. And the worst part? Then came the final blow. Horizon's voice crackled again, urgent now. Captain. Multiple ships inbound. Union identification codes confirmed. Rourke's stomach dropped. The Union wasn't sending a rescue team. They were sending a kill team. Marco's eyes darkened. They're tying up loose ends? Isla clenched her jaw. They never expected us to make it this far. They won't make that mistake again, Rourke said grimly. They had survived the planet, survived the ice, survived the things that shouldn't exist. Now they had to survive the Union. The sky ignites as the first Union drop pods descend. Humanity's greatest enemy has just arrived. The sky burned. Union drop pods descended like falling stars, their engines roaring as they cut through Vorik 7's turbulent atmosphere. The frozen wasteland trembled beneath them, ice fracturing under the force of orbital thrusters. They weren't here to negotiate. They were here to erase the evidence. To erase them. Rourke stood at the shattered remains of the Endurance, rifle slung over his shoulder, eyes locked on the incoming storm of fire and steel. His breath curled into the air, slow and steady. They had survived Vorik 7 itself. They were not going to die now. Isla adjusted her thermal gear, her face set in grim determination. No chance they're just here to talk, is there? Marco chambered a fresh round into his rifle. If they were, they wouldn't be dropping gunships. The Union's betrayal wasn't just calculated, it was preordained. They had sent humanity into this frozen hell to test them, to see if they could survive. But the moment they uncovered the truth about Vorik 7, their fate was sealed. No witnesses. No survivors. That was the Union's plan. Too bad they had underestimated humanity. Rourke activated his comms. Horizon status report. Union forces will make landfall in 3 minutes. Estimated squad strength, 2 full strike teams. Weapons signature indicates high-energy pulse rifles and aerial drone support. Isla grimaced. They have air superiority. We're dead if we engage them head-on. Good thing we're not fighting them head-on. Rourke's eyes swept the frozen battlefield. The Union had the advantage in numbers and firepower, but Vorik 7 wasn't on their side. It was on his. Marco, remember when you said this planet is a death trap? Rourke said, a grin creeping onto his face. Marco raised an eyebrow. Yeah? Time to spring it? The Union landed hard, drop pods slamming into the ice in perfect formation. A dozen soldiers in sleek white armor emerged, their rifles raised, visors scanning for movement. Above them, drones hovered like vultures, scanning the wreckage of the Endurance for life signs. Their squad leader, a tall, imposing officer, signaled his team forward. No survivors. Confirm and eliminate. They moved swiftly, too swiftly. They didn't see the first trap until it was too late. The ground gave way beneath them. The moment their boots crunched against the ice, the planet retaliated. Rourke's team had deliberately weakened sections of the terrain, creating a hidden fault line. With the Union's weight pressing down, the entire structure collapsed, sending 4 soldiers plunging into the abyss below. Their screams vanished into the frozen dark. Chaos erupted. Rourke's team struck fast. Marco's sniper shot cracked through the cold air, piercing a Union drone mid-flight. Isla detonated an explosive charge, sending shrapnel and ice shards raining down on their enemies. The Union soldiers barely had time to react before Vorik 7 itself turned against them. The impact of the explosions triggered a chain reaction. Ice quakes rippled outward, fracturing the landscape, sending jagged frozen spikes erupting from below. The creatures that had lurked in the depths, the same ones that had tested the humans, emerged in full force. A monstrous silhouette surged through the blizzard, its bioluminescent eyes glowing with predatory hunger. It had seen what the humans could do. And now it fought alongside them. The Union forces fell into chaos. They had expected an easy execution. Instead, they were trapped between enemy fire, a hostile planet, and creatures that saw them as prey. They had walked into hell. Rourke saw their commander hesitate. The perfect, calculated formation of the Union was crumbling. They weren't used to losing. He pressed his comms. Horizon, activate emergency distress beacon. Isla snapped her head toward him. You're calling for help now? No, Rourke smirked. I'm calling to let the entire damn galaxy know what the Union tried to do. The distress beacon flared to life, broadcasting everything. The hidden history of Vorik 7, the Union's betrayal, the footage of their ambush. Within seconds, the transmission was everywhere. Every major system, every allied world, every independent colony. The Union had wanted to erase them. Now, the entire galaxy was watching. The moment the broadcast went live, the Union forces panicked. Their mission was to eliminate the survivors quietly. Now there was no way to cover up what they had done. The squad leader barked a desperate command. Fall back. Abort mission. The remaining Union soldiers fled to their dropships, retreating under the cover of fire. The storm swallowed them whole. Then silence. Isla let out a breathless laugh. Did we just win? Marco kicked a discarded Union rifle across the ice. No, he grinned. We just changed the rules. The Union's failed execution became the spark of something greater. Within weeks, the broadcast spread across the stars. Independent factions turned against the Union, demanding answers. Humanity wasn't just seen as survivors anymore. They were seen as something more. The first species to conquer Vorik 7. The first species to thrive where others had perished. And as Rourke looked across the ice at the wreckage of the Endurance, at the beasts that now prowled the frozen wasteland as allies, he knew one thing for certain. This wasn't just a world to survive. This was humanity's first colony. And the galaxy had no idea what was coming next. We came here as a challenge. We leave here as a legend.